This is Jocko Podcast number 251 with Echo Charles and me, Jocko Willink. Good evening, Echo.
Good evening.
And also joining us tonight is my brother Leif Babin from Podcast 11, first guest ever on the podcast, 34, 65, 114, and 138. And obviously Leif was in Task Unit Bruiser as the Charlie Platoon Commander in the Battle of Ramadi. We wrote Extreme Ownership. We wrote The Dichotomy of Leadership together, and we have a leadership consultancy called Echelon Front. And I, at one point in my life, gave him the book that I've been reviewing for the last couple episodes that I wrote the new forward to. The book is called About Face. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, but then we're going somewhere else. Leif, thanks for coming back on, man.
Thanks for having me.
Last time you were on was 2018.
14 August 2018. The world has changed drastically since then.
That's kind of crazy. It's crazy that as much as I see you, we just didn't coordinate for another podcast in over 2 years.
That's apparently.
Did you say everything you had to say on the first 5?
Apparently so. That's just the way it is.
You were telling me about Face in the Battle of Ramadi. Me kind of saying, "Hey, check this out. Check out this section." What were you thinking when I'm reading you about like the South Vietnamese army and how corrupt they were, or whatever, like all these different examples?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was so awesome that this new, this new book with the new forward written by you, for About Face, the new version of it that's out with the new forward. And I remember distinctly coming back from operations in Ramadi multiple times, probably at least 4 or 5 different times I could remember, where I'd like walk into your office in the Tactical Operations Center at the Camp Marguerite, and you'd say, "Hey, listen to this." And I was like, okay. And you'd bust out the book, you'd open it up to like a highlighted section, read the section, and it was mind blowing because it was just like, it was written about the operation that I was just on like an hour ago. And instead it was written 40 years before about Vietnam. And it was pretty eerie. And I never realized all the influences until later when you gave me a copy of the book, which is the one thing that you gave to me and you gave to Seth Stone, the Delta Platoon Commander, when we finished Task Unit Bruiser. We came home. I still have that book. It's dated, January 2007. We'd just been home for 2 months at that point. But now going through that book, I realized like where you got the, renaming Task Unit Bruiser, all those things. Like there was so many things that came from that. So it had so much influence on you and through you on me and everybody in Task Unit Bruiser, and then every generation afterward.
That's crazy. Now, in the book About Face, there's 2 quotes that always bothered me. Here's the first one. Men will do in battle what they have been in the habit of doing in training. General Bruce Clark, one of the U.S. Army's greatest training generals, had written in his then recently published Guidelines for the Leader and Commander. So that's the first quote that bothered me. The second quote that bothered me was this quote: "The troops responded well to hard, hands-on, repetitive, but still interesting work. They may not have wanted to go to Vietnam, but they sure as hell didn't want to die there, so they even flocked to off-duty classes like Recondo. Meanwhile, I established the requirement that all officers and NCOs in the battalion read and carry on their person General Bruce Clark's Guidelines for the Leader and Commander. As far as I was concerned, the finest little handbook on leadership and training ever written. And adopt as their own philosophy the one that I'd learned from a 5x7 card, which I still had, issued to me in Clark's 7th Army in Germany, which stated, an organization does well only those things the boss checks." End quote. So why did those 2 quotes bother me? They didn't bother me because I didn't agree with them, obviously. They bothered me because I could never find this specific book called Guidelines for the Leader and Commander. And I always searched for it. I would look for, and these days you can pretty much find anything online, especially like a lot of the old manuals that I read. old Army manuals. They've been out of print for a long time, but you can go find a PDF. Somebody uploaded it. This thing has been nowhere forever. And here I was learning from this book that Colonel Hackworth wrote, but I could never find the book that Hackworth learned from. And that did not make me happy. So who was this guy, General Bruce Clark? He was in World War I, World War II, Korea. He enlisted in 1917, ended up going to West Point. Hope you don't hold that against him, Leif.
Good to go. I turned down my appointment to West Point, but it's a great place.
You got into
Proud
both,
to be
huh?
an Army school.
Look at you, overachiever.
I had to go to the SEAL route, man. That was the goal.
You that's a rough gamble, right?
It was a rough gamble, and it was a very poor gamble when I graduated and I didn't get selected for the SEAL program. I could tell you, I was like, I should have gone to West Point. I'd be in the Army. I'd have all those opportunities in front of me. But
that is the worst luck that it happens that the SEAL teams is in the Navy, and if you want to be a SEAL and you don't make it into the SEAL teams, you're in the Navy because you probably don't want to have the type of job that a regular Navy dude has if you want to be in the SEAL teams. Would you concur?
Oh, definitely.
I mean, if you want to be in the SEAL teams, that means you want to be shooting a machine gun and running around in the streets or the jungle or whatever. You don't want to be on a ship, working in an engine room or driving a ship
standing bridge watch
or whatever. And those are cool jobs too. Different people like different jobs, but those are two almost totally different types of jobs. Whereas, if you tried for special forces and you didn't make it, you'd still be an infantry guy, and that's still the similar thing. But you just rolled the dice big time.
I did, but it worked out. And, you got to trust. In fact, had I gotten selected for the SEAL program right out of the academy in 1998 when I graduated, I'd have never been a task unit bruiser. I would have not been Charlie Platoon Commander. I would have done my OIC probably at least a year or 2 or 3 prior to that, as a lot of the guys who were my same year group. So, that's the good Lord has a plan, and you got to just trust in that plan. And had I gotten selected for Marine Corps, I obviously never had a chance to be in the SEAL teams either. So, look, West Point's an awesome school, man. It was a really, really agonizing decision for me because I got picked up for West Point in it was like probably January, February of my senior year, and I found out I got an appointment, so I accepted it, and then I didn't find out until like April that I got into the Navy. So it was, it was a big gamble for sure. But hey, man, it's an awesome career. Obviously, there's a great rivalry between West Point and Army and Navy. Everybody knows the football games, but I am one of the things we're most proud of, obviously, in Task Unit Bruiser was being the 1-1 AD Army SEALs, as they called us. And so good on General Clark. One thing that I just wanted to say when you read that quote, I'm fascinated, to listen to this as well, because I have used that quote. An organization does well, only those things the boss checks, probably 1,000 times since teaching the junior officer training course up through what we do now with Echelon Front. And I did not realize it came out of this book.
I was going to say, don't you usually attribute it to Hackworth?
I was attributing it to Hackworth. Yeah. I think I just misremembered that he obviously was giving credit to General Clark, and I clearly did not remember that, and I've not done that right.
Yeah. So he went to West Point. So enlisted World War I, went to West Point, World War II, commanded the 4th Armored Division in Patton's 3rd Army, Battle of Aricourt, Battle of the Bulge, Distinguished Service Cross, and 3 Silver Stars. Also in Korea. Ended up with 45 or so years of service. Not only leading troops, but also he oversaw a bunch of training schools and training commands. Died in 1988 at age 86. And I wanted this book. I searched for this book for years. I wrote an email to the publisher. This publisher still exists. I'm going to call him out right now because I'm sure someone will reach out to him. I think it's Stackpole Books. They still exist. And we've covered other books of theirs on this podcast because they print a lot of military-type books. I think The Clay Pigeons of St. Lo, we covered that on this podcast, and a few others that are in the queue. I reached out to him and sent him an email. Hey, I'm looking for this book. I see that you used to publish it. Nothing, never heard, nothing back. And then you know, like you said, the Lord works in mysterious ways. The About Face, the new version comes out, and I search on Amazon once a month. I'll search and see it, because they would have this book. They'd have it listed in there. That's how I knew the publisher was. But they would have it in there and not available, not available, not available. For years, it's been not available. It popped up. It says available, one copy. $300, bro. $300. This is, and I'm only holding a photocopy right now. It was $300. This thing is 117 pages. It's like, I don't know, 6 by 11, or it's small. It's this little book. It showed up in a little tiny envelope. I was super stoked. And, as you might imagine, like you said, it's filled with lessons, filled with the obvious roots of Hackworth's theories around training and leadership, which I stole, as you already rightfully accused me of stealing many things from Hackworth, as I fully admit all the time. That I stole, I used, passed on to everyone I could. Still try and pass on. Still try and pass on at About Face. Still trying to pass on what we do at Echelon Front. Try and pass on these lessons. So,
you know what? I don't think you can actually use the word steal, because they're freely given.
Yeah.
In the same way that, like, when people are like, "Hey, do you mind if we like talk about extreme ownership with our team?" We're like, no, I actually don't mind. In fact, that's what we wrote the book for. That's why I'm sure that's why Hack wrote the About Face. And I'm sure, obviously, that's why General Clark wrote what he wrote. So, it's not stealing, it's freely given. And I think, as we have often said, like, we didn't learn anything new. We just maybe package it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Or use a different term than maybe others use.
it's always good when, it's pretty common for, you know, me to do an initial client call with a company, and they'll be, you know, give me a brief on their company, and they're like, "Oh, our company values are blah, 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 extreme ownership." And they're like, "Hey, we hope you don't mind." We're like, exact same thing. I say, you can't steal what's free. So, and I try and give Hackworth credit. Yeah. But I guess you're right. Can't steal what's free. But what we can do is we can take it and we can try and pass it on. So without further ado, I present to you, at long last, Guidelines for the Leader and Commander. I'll have to show it to you later. There's a little signature. I don't have it in the photocopy. It's written. There's a little, you know, somebody gave it to someone. Someone gave it to, like, the command sergeant major or something like that. All right, so here we go. Dedicated to the ground combat soldier. The paramount concern of the Army is the ground combat soldier. He is the focal point of all our efforts, organizing, equipping, training, sustaining, and supporting him so that he can perform his indispensable role in combat is the Army role. The role is equally significant in any kind of war, hot or cold. It is just as important in general war as it is in limited war. For our nation to entertain any notion to the contrary would be dangerous. The danger could be social as well as military. More than any other category of personnel in the armed forces, the ground combat soldier comes from the general populace. He is the private citizen under arms, the clenched fist of his people. I think I'm just rolling with that from now on.
That is the greatest description of a combat.
Yes.
Of a combat soldier I've ever heard in my life.
The clenched fist of the people.
Why is this the first time I'm hearing this? That's the one thing I'm just remiss about.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Me too.
We could have put that up as like a poster for Tasking a Bruiser.
You know, I think I used, and you may have heard me use this. In fact, I know you did. The sword of destruction. I use that to describe sort of what our methodology was, especially in cleaning out insurgents, and how, hey, everyone wants to make friends and win the hearts and minds, and that's all definitely important. But that really comes, and this is when I use this line that would come after the sword of destruction has been wielded on the insurgents or the bad guys. I think the fist of the people is better. We're going with it.
The clenched fist.
The clenched fist of the people. Back to the book. It is by no idle chance in the history of mankind that the course of democracy parallels the importance accorded to the ground combat soldier in the military forces of nations. It is no exaggeration to say that the basic freedoms we now enjoy are closely related to his ascending importance on the battlefield